Good morning. My name is Larry Scott, and I am an alcoholic. I'm a recovered alcoholic, and I'm free this morning. My sobriety date is December 31st, 1987, and it just tickles me to death. We covered something last night in one of the forwards about each letter, each inquiry to the Little Central office was painstakingly answered. And it dawned on me when we got home last night, I wanted to show you, Ruth Hawk was a non-alcoholic secretary. And she typed on if you will notice how tiny that typewriter is. I mean, the second edition, that thing isn't but about 3 inches high. But check this out. I mean, this typewriter is tiny. It's not as big as this book. And if you'll notice the space bar, she's worn completely through the porcelain on that thing. But that's the typewriter the big book was typed on.
Hey everybody, I'm Charlie Yao and I'm an alcoholic. So glad to be here with you. My sobriety date is January 11th, 1994. My home group is the Savannah group in Savannah, Georgia. And we're the oldest group in Savannah, and we've been carrying the message to the suffering alcoholic since January 17th, 1944. We're the third oldest group in Area 16, which is the state of Georgia. And I'm very proud of my home group. If you're not proud of your home group, that means you're not doing enough work in it to be proud of it. It's quite an honor to be here, to be sitting with my best friend, Larry Boyd, and to be able to participate in what got us here and what's keeping us here on a daily basis. And it's just an honor to be able to talk about the history and then get into the black, the part that's saved my life and countless other alcoholics. We made a disclaimer last night that we're not gurus or experts or anything. We're not. Someone asked me just a while ago, "Are you ready to teach?" And I said, "Oh, no. We're nothing but students." And a while ago, Larry Boyd and I asked God, not only into this venue, but through us, maybe we could be a channel. And maybe there's a Charlie or a Larry sitting out there today that'll hear something. They'll let him go to bed tonight and thank the God of his understanding for another day of sobriety, because that's what this whole deal's about. One day at a time, but for a permanent effect. Go ahead, Larry Boyd.
How many of you guys are here today that weren't here last night? Well, we're glad you're here. You missed last night. You missed some history. We went through a lot of stuff starting in 1907 up through the doctor's opinion. And this morning we were going to do some readings, but I think we're just going to go ahead and get into the text. What I'd invite you to do is let's pretend that we all just went through medical school. And through this teaching at the medical school, they taught us about, say, appendicitis. Well, we come to school one morning and we're actually in class in what we will call a teaching hospital. And that morning we show up at the hospital and they put a white lab jacket on us and put a stethoscope around our neck and give us that clipboard. And they march us down the hall of this teaching hospital into the room of a patient suffering from appendicitis. And we go into the room and we pick up the chart at the end of his bed and we look at it, elevated fever, a little shaky, got some redness, he's a little sensitive to the touch in this particular area, and you're asking questions and he's going, yeah, we're writing our little notes. So the disease has been described to us from a medical standpoint. And now the book is written in a fashion to where we get to take a look at how the disease of alcoholism is manifested in the life, the mind, the family, the business, the entire being of one Bill Wilson. And before we go in and start reading a little bit about Bill, this, just so you know, this is my favorite chapter in the book. I love Bill Wilson. He was a hoot. He was a hoot. But Bill Wilson didn't fall out of the womb, and this is my opinion, being the crazy man he ended up being. There were some circumstances in Bill's life that created some of events that unfolded as he grew older. And this is not in your book. First thing I'll share with you this story was several pages longer than it is until, they got it edited down. And there's some events in his story. There are events that happened in his story that are not reflected here. For instance, Ebby visiting him. Ebby visited him numerous times, not just the once. And on numerous occasions, Bill threw him out. Every time he'd bring up God, Bill would say, "Get the hell out of my house." Born William Griffith Wilson. He was born in East Dorset, Vermont. And I've got some pictures to show you of his birthplace. Yes, sir.
Could I make a request?
You betcha.
Could we please do the set-aside prayer? Just get
You
this
sure
stuff
can.
kicked
And
off.
there, look at there, Charlie.
Attaboy.
Ask and you shall receive. And Charlie says we're going to need to pray a little bit before we get into this. Bill Wilson might get y'all a little unholy. All right, let's do this together. You ready? Dear God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, about my disease, about the big book, about the 12 steps of the program, about the fellowship, and all spiritual terms, especially you, God. Do this so I may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me to see the truth. Amen. In the handout? It's not in the handout. I thought it was. And again, let me just go ahead and do this real quick. I'm going to show this today, and I will show it again as often as you want. Hang on a minute. Go to slide. That's our information. And also this weekend, we're going to have business cards, or not business cards, they're calling cards. We'll have them up on the table. Come grab one. We probably didn't bring enough, but take them until they're gone.
Mine's over here, and Larry Boy's is over right there.
Anything that we cover this weekend is on this computer, and we'll send it to you electronically. So if there's things that you want that aren't written down, we can send those things to you. Got it?
Hang on 1 second. Okay.
Ready? Speak for yourself, young man. You can call us anything or anytime. Charlie and I are nocturnal, so when it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon here, it's 8 o'clock back at our house, but you're lucky I'm lucky if I see the back of my eyelids before 3 o'clock in the morning every night. I'm just a night owl, and there was a couple of ladies trying to get us to a 6 a.m. meeting out here, and I'm thinking, really? I've got a 12-hour clock. 6 o'clock is just before the sun goes down on my watch. Okay, everybody good? Yes? You're welcome. Okay, so we're William Griffith Wilson, and we are going to this slide, and there he is, the handsome devil. Bill was born in this house. This is the Wilson house in East Dorset, Vermont. And if you're sitting there, right across the street was a small, probably 1,000 square foot, if that, old wood frame house that was owned by his in-laws, or his grandparents, I'm sorry. His mother's parents, the Griffiths, lived across the street. Fayette, and I can't remember her name. Doesn't matter. And he came from a long line of alcoholics. And at family gatherings, they talked a great deal about the male side of the Wilson family, how bad they were to drink whiskey and show themselves. So he was warned. And before he got very old, he was still a little boy, his daddy, Gilly, decided that he was going to go off to Canada and work in the mine. And he left the family. Well, he wasn't gone long, and his mother, Emily, decided that she needed to go to medical school in Boston. So she left. So here's Bill and his sister, Dorothy. They're abandoned. They're living a childhood unlike anybody else in that little hamlet called East Dorset. And in their little adolescent minds, they've been thrown away by the two people that were supposed to love them the most. They're left to be raised by this old couple, their grandparents. And Bill knew that he had to do something to show you that he wasn't different. He could, by God, do anything you could do and probably do it better, just daring. And his grandfather gave him a nickname as the number one man. And he challenged Bill to do many things through his adolescent years, such as making a boat, making a boomerang. And Bill became first chair and first violin in the band. And he became quarterback of the football team. He became the star pitcher on the baseball team. He was in the debating society. And later he went to Norwich Military Academy, and he went over to Burr and Burton Academy, which was just down the road in Manchester. It was kind of a lush green, lawned kind of a place with a country club. This is where the well-to-do hung out. So in essence, what I'm saying to you is Bill became an overachiever. And I've been riding with my friend Randy Harris all week. And Randy's an overachiever. He's got the door jambs of that Suburban out there waxed. If you lean, I set my briefcase down on the floor mat of his truck, this briefcase. And it slid right out the door. It's just like I set it down on a wad of snot. I said, Randy, your floor mats are armor all. He says, I know. I mean, when you get in there, you better fasten your seatbelt. You'll fall out. Randy's an overachiever. I get it. I can be riding down the road at 80 miles an hour on my Harley. I look down, and there's a fingerprint on the chrome. I will pull off in the emergency lane, get a microfiber towel out, and wipe it off. I swear to God. I get Bill Wilson. That's why I love him so much. Bill drank for 20 years, and Dr. Bob drank for 29 years. Their drinking careers were similar, but yet different. His sobriety date is December the 11th, 1934. So, we're on page 1, chapter 1, Bill's story.
In the beginning of the first edition, Hank Parkhurst, who was Bill Wilson's first sponsee, that kind of helped Bill write and edit a lot. There were a lot of hands in the book, but Hank Parkhurst helped Bill a whole lot. Hank's the one that came up with the scheme of selling the stocks that were about as useless as toilet paper to get money to try to get a publisher to print this book. But Bill's story, you sit in meetings and then you hear people start about, they were. They tell their story from the womb on, Well, Bill doesn't do that. Bill starts getting into the crux of what alcohol, how it was affecting his life. And the first paragraph, Bill's 19 years old. So we're going to try to go through the timeline as we go through this and keep noting how old Bill is, the time, the era in which all this is happening. So,
more importantly, the progression of the disease of alcoholism, and as it begins manifesting and gets progressively worse as he gets older.
So Bill was born November 26, 1895, and when Larry Boy was showing you the Wilson house, it was just a whistle stop. The train comes right through there, and it was a little bed and breakfast hotel, had a bar in it, and Bill was actually born behind the bar. Now, if you go to the Wilson house up there, the bar is gone now, but where that little room is, they have a lamp that is never shut off. And memory of where Bill was born, behind the bar. So that lamp is never turned off. If you go to the Wilson House up in East Dorset, they have meetings back in the carriage house. The West Dorset group meets there. And right across the street is where Bill grew up at his grandfather and grandmother's house. So Larry's giving you a little synopsis of what was Bill's growing up days, and now we start on page 1. War fever ran high in the New England town to which we new young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned, and we were flattered when the first citizens took us to their homes, making us feel heroic. Here was love, applause, war, sometimes sublime, with intervals hilarious. I was part of life at last. And in the midst of the excitement, I discovered liquor.
I'd invite you to highlight that sentence. Most people have their first drink. Bill Wilson discovered liquor. That's a very alcoholic statement. And again, he wants to prove to the world that he's somebody. And he says, I was part of life at last. Up until this point, I was that little boy that was thrown away by my parents.
I forgot the strong warnings and prejudices of my people concerning drink.
They told him for years and years, all the men on your side of the family are sorry, no good alcoholics. Watch it, Bill.
And in time we sail for over there. I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol.
There's your first little ticket to the progression. Lonely, drink. Drink's his best friend.
We landed in England. I visited Winchester Cathedral. Now, much moved, I wandered outside. My attention was caught by a doggerel on an old tombstone.
And what I'm going to invite you to do here is underline or highlight the words much moved. Something happened inside that cathedral. And we're going to visit that topic 3 times. Something happened that was sudden and profound. He had a spiritual experience inside that building, and we'll clarify that down the road here a bit.
Yeah, and the doggerel is just a poorly written verse. It just if you're having trouble with some of the words, don't be afraid to ask what the meaning is pertaining to the story.
And this is the tombstone of Thomas Thetcher.
Here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier's never forgot whether he dieth by musket or by pot. Ominous warning, which I failed to heed.
Ominous is threatening.
Okay, so then Bill leaves for war in 1914. He's 19. He's a second lieutenant in a battery in artillery, and now it's 22. And a veteran of foreign wars.
Now, really? A veteran?
A veteran.
Yeah, and Bill never saw any action. He never fired the first shot. But he's a veteran of foreign wars, by God. If you don't think, ask me.
I went home at last. I fancied myself a leader, for had not the men of my battery given me a special token of appreciation.
Probably a bottle of scotch.
And my talent for leadership, I imagine, would place me at the head of vast enterprises, which I would imagine would be of utmost assurance.
So Bill's just coming back from the big WW1. And he is a most egotistical, grandiose sucker. He says, my talent for leadership, I imagine, would place me at the head of IBM. And I'd manage it like ain't nobody ever managed it before. I'm Bill, by God, Wilson.
So I took a night law course at Brooklyn Law School and obtained employment as an investigator for a surety company.
Now, the part of this that kills me, Bill goes to Brooklyn Law School to become an attorney. And as we're going to read, he never picked up his diploma. Bill Wilson didn't want to be cookie cutter. He had to be different. He had to stand out. He was cutting out his own niche in life. And hell, anybody can be an attorney.
The drive for success was on. I'd prove to the world I was important.
See, there it is. I'm going to prove to you that I measure up, that I'm a little better than everybody else. I'm different. I'm Bill Wilson.
And my work took me about Wall Street, and little by little I became interested in the market. Now, many people lost money, but some became very rich, so why not I? I studied economics and business as well as law.
Here's another progression in the disease right here.
Now, potential alcoholic that I was, I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I was too drunk to think or write.
You know, I've been too drunk to think. And I've been too drunk to write. I just don't know if I've ever been too drunk to think or write. At one of his finals, he is too drunk to think or write. Go, Bill.
So our timeline is 1920 now. Though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife, Lois. We had long talks when I would steal her for boating by telling her that men of genius conceive their best projects when drunk.
Now, I think Bill's funny. We've gone a page and a half, and he drops he's gotten married, and he drops Lois in as a footnote. Oh, yeah, there was this woman I met. And the thing about Lois is a blue blood. Bill married up. He married way out of his class. She was a little bit older than Bill. And he started courting her. He was delivering wood to their summer home up on Emerald Lake. And her daddy was a doctor, Clark Burnham. And he told Lois, he said, you need to stay away from that Wilson boy. He ain't much good. But he kept courting her. He wore her down, and they got into a very hot and heavy love affair. So he said, my drinking disturbed my wife. By the way, I got married somewhere in this thing, you know. But he said he would steal her for boatings by telling her that the best men of genius conceive their best projects when drunk. Really? That the most majestic constructions of philosophic thought were so derived. There's a lot of little words we could drop in, but we're going to call this rationalization to Lois. Y'all remember sitting in the Waffle House? I don't know if you got Waffle House. The IHOP out here. Y'all don't have Waffle House? God, y'all are missing a piece of Americana. We ought to take a moment of silence for the Waffle House. Anyway, you could be sitting in that IHOP. You've been out there running and ripping and doing those outside things, along with a lot of dope, a lot of alcohol, and you're sitting there and you have solved the world's problems on the back of that napkin. Remember them nights? And then the waitress will come over and set a sweaty glass of water down, and it all runs off. You know, those philosophic thoughts, those genius ideas. You got it all worked out. Well, that's what he's telling Lois. And Lois is perfect to have founded Al-Anon. She's a poster kid.
Now, by the time I completed the course, I knew that law was not for me. The inviting whirlwind of Wall Street had me in its grips. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. Now, out of this alloy of drink and speculation, I commenced to forge the weapon that one day would turn in its flight like a boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons.
And if you go to GSO, if you go to Stepping Stones, Bill was challenged by his grandfather, Fayette. He told him, he says, the only people on the planet that are capable of making a successful boomerang are the Aboriginal people in Australia. And Bill said, baloney. And he took his cherry headboard. Alrighty. Thought a helicopter was landing. He took the headboard of his bed, which was made of cherry, and cherry's about as hard as concrete. He started whittling on that thing. After a year, he came up with a boomerang, and he took his grandpa outside, and he says, Grandpa, watch this, which are the last words of a redneck. Hey, y'all, watch this. And then his buddy says, well, hell, I can do that. Anyway, he flipped it, and it came back and damn near killed them both. But if you go up to GSO, if you go to Stepping Stones, you'll see the boomerangs that Bill made. And he's kind of dropping it in here because he's a boomerang-making fool.
Now, living modestly, Lois and I saved $1,000. It went into certain securities, and that was rather cheap and rather unpopular. I rightly imagined that they would have someday great rise. I failed to persuade my broker friends to send me out looking over factories and managements, but my wife and I decided to go anyway. I developed a theory that most people lost money in stocks through ignorance of markets. I discovered many more reasons later on.
So what Bill is describing is the early form of insider trading. He wanted to go back behind the lines and into those back rooms of the research and development areas of these great factories like General Electric and Westinghouse and so on, and see what tomorrow was going to unfold for our country or our world, and then give prospective stock investors that information so that they can make an informed decision, which is what Martha Stewart did and went behind the wall for it. So he went to them and he said, boys, y'all just need to give me a little stipend, a little per diem, and I'll go out here and I'll find out what the world's going to develop, and we'll get rich. And they said, Bill, that's way too forward of thinking for us. So good luck, have a good day. And then,
well, and another thing Bill would do, he didn't just try to get in the door and talk to the bosses. You know, he didn't want to talk to he would, every town he'd go in, he'd find what bar the workers were drinking at after work, and that's where he went and set up drinks. The people who was actually doing the work is the ones he talked to, get them a little loose lift, and they said, oh, yeah, man, we're thinking about putting sugar on cornflakes. He said, really? They said, yeah, we're developing it right now. So all of a sudden, Tony Tigers, he calls and says, it might be a good idea to check this out. Kellogg's has got something going.
Yeah, one of his big cash cow was Pinnock and Ford. Pinnock and Ford was a grain products company, and their biggest client was Kellogg's up in Battle Creek, Michigan. And he was looking at Portland Cement, and he was looking at General Electric and Westinghouse. But Pinnock and Ford was the one that he got all of his buddies and family involved in.
So in 1925, we gave up our positions and off we roared on a 1919 Harley-Davidson motorcycle.
Now these pictures are a little bit misleading, especially this one. Bill was typically passed out in the sidecar. And this is more realistic because Lois was the one wheeling that 1919 Harley. And there's some motorcycle people in this room, and I just want to make a real quick little point. Up until 1984, Harley-Davidson was probably the most undependable piece of machinery that ever burned gas that ever been invented. And this thing was, it was awful. And the tires on this thing, you can't tell it from these pictures, but the tires were white. They were pure latex. And if you ran over a sand spur, they'd go flat. And they had as many as 3 or 4 flat tires in a day, and there ain't Harley shops on every corner like they are today. And Bill was real good with tinkering. He could fix stuff. And there was one time where Lois got that thing coasting down the backside of a hill with a sidecar, and she got it running about 80 to 90 miles an hour, and the carburetor vibrated off of it, and they had to go back and find it. But there were no highways. There were no super slabs. It was dirt roads and, traveling rough. And they rode that thing from New York City all the way to Tampa, Florida in a year. I have a book, and I've loaned it to Scotty, I've loaned it to Charlie, and they don't print them anymore. It's called The Diary of Two Motorcycle Hobos. And it was edited by a gal named Ellie Van Vee. And it's Lois's diary, day to day. She would write down the date, the time, and the town that they were in on this trip. And my opinion is that Lois Wilson was a much better writer than Bill. And it's interesting. They came down that East Coast. They stopped in Atlanta and all the way down. And she didn't talk about his drinking a lot till real close to the end. She was real careful not to throw Bill under the bus.
So we roared off on the motorcycle, sidecar stuffed with tents, blankets, a change of clothes, and 3 huge volumes of financial reference services. Our friends thought a loony commission should be appointed. Perhaps they were right. I had had some success at speculations, so we had a little money. But we once worked on a farm for a month to avoid drawing on our small capital.
This was in April of 1925, and this was the Barefoot Farm, or the Goldfoot Farm. And when they stopped, they had $4 left out of that little piece of money they had saved up. And they worked there for a month and earned $93.25. And this is in July of 25. And when they went to get work, the farmer said, well, can she cook? He said, no, she can't boil water. Well, what can she do? Well, she can help keep the house clean. And she helped keep the house clean, and Bill worked out on the farm, keeping the farm implements, the tractors and that running. So they worked there for a month, earning $93.25.
That was the last honest manual labor on my part for many a day. We covered the whole eastern United States in a year. At the end of it, my reports to Wall Street procured me a position there and the use of a large expense account. The exercise of an option brought in more money, leaving us with a profit of several $1,000s for that year.
So whenever Bill would call in his reports to Wall Street, they're seeing that his idea has become extremely profitable and fruitful. And they were wiring him money out on the road, giving him an expense account and giving him a lot of attaboys. And Bill's going, yeah, I told you. Told you.
And for the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived.
Please highlight or underline those three words, because this is what this man has been seeking all his life. I'm going to prove to you that I am better. I'm as good, if not better, than you, you son of a bitch. I got to tell you, he was a machine, man. I had arrived.
And my judgment and ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions.
Kind of like that when E.F. Hutton talks, people listen.
Yeah. Bill was good at what he did. You know, make no mistake about that. He had a good idea. He was a visionary. And he'd do a lot of visionarying, especially when he'd get about 5/4 drunk. He was a good visionary then. So paper millions or stock certificates is what. And he's becoming rich now. He ain't just making that $94 they had. He's coming a long way, baby. So the great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling.
And this was a great time in our country. I mean, in the 20s, people were making money hand over fist. I mean, it was a great time economically in our country.
A drink was taking an important and exhilarating part in my life.
You want to highlight that. There's another line in the progression of the disease of alcoholism in Bill's life.
There was loud talk in jazz places uptown. Everyone spending thousands and chattered in millions. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. I made a host of fair weather friends.
That's another highlightable line right there. He made a host of fair weather friends. You remember them days when you had that good stuff at your house? And all your friends came over, and they were your best friend. And then when that stuff was gone, you looked around, and there was nobody there. They weren't there because they liked you. They were there because of what you had. He made a host of fair weather friends because they could get him jizzed up a little bit and get that inside line on what was hot in the stock market.
Now
Bill was not easy to be around. He was a braggart, loudmouth. I mean, he was not easy to be around.
My drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night.
There's another timeline in the progression of the disease.
The remonstrance or protest of my friends terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf.
Row is a fight or disagreement, and when you first read the book, it says they terminated in a row. And that would probably fit too, but in this one, it's a row. They would get in a fight, they would protest his behaviors, and they terminated in a row, in a fight or a disagreement. And it says, I became a lone wolf. Truth is, Bill was a lone wolf. People were hanging around him for what he had or what he could do for them.
There were many unhappy scenes in our sumptuous apartment. There had been no real infidelity, for loyalty to my wife helped at times by extreme drunkenness, and that kept me out of those scrapes.
I just wonder what his definition of real is. That's all. I'm just saying.
Rigorous honesty is in every word of this book now.
Yeah.
In 1929, I contracted gulf fever.
That's an ugly disease. I sponsor some men afflicted with gulf fever.
And we went at once to the country. Now, Lois applaud that I'd started out. While Lois applauded that I started out to overtake Walter Hagen.
So Bill's name dropping now. Walter Hagen was like the Tiger Wood of the day. He says, I'm going out here and I'm going to chase Walter Hagen. And we believe Walter Hagen to be an alcoholic because his favorite slogan was 69 every day and a fifth every night.
Liquor caught up with me much faster than I came up behind Walter.
Well, that's a surprise.
I began to be jittery in the morning. Now, golf permitted drinking every day and every night.
What he's saying is he contracted golf fever because why? He could drink every day and every night. It was an accepted behavior. He didn't care anything about golf.
It was,
But that, it's kind of, it just gave you a little hint. He's beginning to get jittery in the morning. He's got to drink at this point. It's no longer he's wanting to, he's got to.
Now, it was fun to caroom around with exclusive courses, which had inspired such awe in me as a lad.
That's up at that Manchester Country Club that we talked about a while ago.
And I acquired an impeccable coat of tan as one sees on the well-to-do. Now, the local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism. But abruptly in October 1929, hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. After one of those days of inferno, I wobbled from the hotel bar to the brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock.
Now, I think it's funny. He didn't wobble from the office to the bar. He hadn't been at work. He wobbled to the bar back to where he worked.
5 hours after the market had closed, the ticker was still clattered. I was staring at an inch of tape which bore the inscription XYZ -32.
That's Pinnock and Ford.
It had been a positive 52 that morning. I was finished, and so were many friends. The papers reported men jumping to their death from towers of high finance.
Notice high finance is capitalized. That was the money god to many. The stock market was the money god to many in those days.
Now, that disgusted me. I wouldn't jump. I went back to the bar.
I love Bill Wilson.
Yeah, buddy.
Go, Bill.
Now, my friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock. So what? Tomorrow's another day. As I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back.
As he drank, the allergy of the body got all over him, and he was off.
Now, the next morning, I telephoned a friend, Dick Johnson, in Montreal.
Dick Johnson. I don't know about you, but if that was my name, I'd go to the courthouse and get a name change. But what happened when our stock market crashed in 29, it had a completely opposite effect in Canada. Theirs rose. So he calls Dick Johnson looking for a job, and Dick said, "Man, we're on fire up here. Come on up," because at this point, the name Bill Wilson was internationally known. He was a bulldog in that market. "We want you, Bill. Come on."
Now, Dick had plenty of money left and thought I'd better go to Canada. By the following spring, we were living in our accustomed style. I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. No St. Helena for me.
When he talks about that accustomed style, they were living in a double apartment with judges paneling and crystal chandeliers. Bill was a millionaire of the day, and they lost all that. And when he moved to Canada, they're living right on the St. Lawrence River, had a big corner apartment overlooking the river. They're right back to it because everything Bill touches turns to gold. This man is the top of his game when he's sober.
But drinking caught up with me again, and my generous friends had to let me go. But this time we stayed broke.
So at this point, Bill is unemployable. It's got him now. He can't hold a job. No matter how good his judgment and skills are, nobody wants him around.
Now, we went to live with Lois's parents.
Just like all good heroes, and they moved into this house. This is 182 Clinton Street.
And I found a job, but lost it as a result of a brawl with a taxi driver.
There's E.F. Hutton. He's fighting with New York City cab drivers now. This is, we're probably going to show you this again, but as you walk in this door, you go in, and then this would be the basement area, and then it had more living quarters upstairs. But this is the area that he drug his mattress to a lower floor lest he leave. Remember that later on in the story?
Now,
when we were there in 2010, they had just sold that apartment for $2.2 million.
Now, mercifully, no one would guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years, or hardly draw a sober breath.
Truth of the matter is, he really never worked again. Truth of the matter is, he'd get a little stock inside line on something, and he'd sell that tip to the brokerage houses, but he really never, ever worked again.
Lois began to work at Macy's department store, making $22.50 a week, coming home exhausted to find me drunk. I became an unwelcome hanger-oner at brokerage places.
He was trying to get work. He needed work. He wanted to try and help Lois out, or at least bolster his little drinking kitty. But they'd say, Bill, you smell terrible. You're unkept. You're unshaven. We'd really appreciate it if you wouldn't come around here anymore.
Now, liquor ceased to be a luxury.
How much did she make?
$22.50. That's how much Lois was paid at Macy's department store. She was actually in school as well, learning to be an interior designer. And she was an incredible seamstress. There's a lot about Lois that isn't mentioned in this story, but one hell of a lady.
Now, here's another, you may want to highlight this, is another major step in the progression of the disease of alcoholism. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity.
Yep.
Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, and often 3 got to be the routine.
And when he says bathtub gin, we're in the Prohibition era. And this stuff, it had lye, it had stuff in it that would kill you deader than a doornail. We're talking 200, 250 proof kind of stuff. And when he says 2 bottles a day, we're not talking about half pints. We're talking about handle jugs. 2 bottles of bathtub gin a day, sometimes 3.
Now,
Got to be routine.
Yeah. Now, sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s and not pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens.
Bill's a real stand-up guy. He's not helping Lois pay Edison for the electricity or the groceries. He's paying the dope man down at the bar and the delicatessen for his dope he's doing.
This went on endlessly, and I began to awaken very early in the morning, shaking violently.
Delirium tremens.
A tumbler full of gin, followed by a half dozen bottles of beer, would be required if I were to eat any breakfast.
So, any bartenders in here? Yeah? A tumbler. We're not talking a shot glass or a rocks glass. We're talking a tumbler. He's drinking a tumbler full of this homemade brew and a 6-pack just to keep from yipping his Cheerios as he gets them up to his mouth.
Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation.
I'm Bill Wilson.
And there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hopes.
There you go.
Gradually, things got worse.
There's a promise.
The house was taken over by the mortgage holder, my mother-in-law died, and my wife and father-in-law became ill. When I got a promising business opportunity, stocks were at the low in 32, and I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished.
Everybody still respected Bill for his accomplishments before his disease got a hold of him. And somehow or another, he got a group of guys with deep pockets together to do a power takeover. And they told him, they said, Bill, we would really like for you to head this up and be an integral part of it. And if it succeeds, you can share generously in the profits that we make from this thing. But we know that you have a problem with alcohol, and if you get involved in alcohol, you're out. And he said, no problem. He says, I'll do my job. So they went over to New Jersey, and they were sitting in this conference room, and they were talking about putting this deal together. And out come a jug, and somebody popped the plug out of it and said, what is this? And somebody said, well, that's New Jersey Lightning. Guy says, New Jersey Lightning? What is that? He says, best Applejack you'll ever drink. Guy goes, gluggity, gluggity, glug. Woo! Boy, that's some good stuff. What'd you call that again? He said, New Jersey Lightning. Bill, you want to hit? No, I'm good. So it went on around, and somebody else, gluggity, gluggity, glug. Yeah, buddy, that's some good stuff. What is that again? New Jersey Lightning. It went around a time or two, and Bill said, you know, I believe I will have just one. He said, I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished. He could not drink.
In that paragraph right there, this progression now, you may, just for your, this is Bill's first attempt at willpower controlling his problem.
And there's another little thing that jumped out at me in the last year as I was taking one of my guys through the book. Let me point out something to you as Charlie reads.
I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink.
Right there, Bill Wilson, he gets his first glimpse of the disease concept. He saw that he couldn't take so much as one drink because every time he has one drink, what happens? The allergy sets in and he can't quit. So he gets a glimpse at that. He says, I saw that I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. Before then, I'd written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did. Bill was real bad to write promises in the family Bible. He'd date it and say, "My dear Lois, on this day I promise you, so help me God Almighty, I'm done, I'm through forever." And it'd be June the 1st. June the 6th, "My sweet Lois," and he got to where he was pricking his finger and actually writing the promises in the Bible in his own blood. And Lois got pissed off and said, "Bill, quit writing in the Bible. You're just messing the Bible up, and I'm not going to have any room left to write the date of your death. Don't write in the Bible anymore, Bill. They're empty promises." The
last solemn vow that Bill took in the family Bible was September 3rd, 1930. Now, Bill doesn't get sober to December 11th, 1934. So this progression, he knew there was a bad problem going on with Bill Wilson. But first he's trying willpower. And now, whatever I got to do, I will do. And this is what the last promise that he wrote in the Bible said, "Finally, and for a lifetime, thank God for your love." They asked Lois one time why she stayed with Bill, and she said because he needed a mother. That's a perfect, typical Al-Anon statement. She loved that man with every fiber of her being, and she knew the good that was in him. But he would not quit drinking. That's her words. He won't quit drinking. Bill's words is that I can't quit drinking. And we'll cover that in a little bit more. Shortly afterward, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. Where had been all my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way and I'd taken it. Was I crazy? I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. Now, renewing my resolve, I tried again. Now, here comes some self-knowledge. Sometimes past and confidence begin to be replaced by cocksureness. A bad thing happens to an alcoholic that don't drink for a while. Mm-hmm. We get to feeling better. Then all of a sudden we take it all back and say, "I got her now, Hoss." Because alcohol's lying to us. Yeah, you got in trouble last time, Charlie boy. You won't get in trouble this time.
We're going to see all the ways he manifests self in his attempts. He had self-will. Now he's replaced it with self-confidence.
I could laugh at gin meals. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked to a cafe for a telephone.
He went in there to make a phone call. What happened?
In no time I was beating my fist on the bar, asking myself, how did it happen? As the whiskey rose in my head, I told myself I would manage better next time. But I might as well get good and drunk then, and so I did. I
love Bill Wilson. He says, as the whiskey rose to my head, what he's talking about is the allergy became fully supplanted in my body. I told myself I'll do this some other time because I can't stop now.
Why I relate to it so much is Bill is looking for that one spot where he can honestly say, "I don't care. I know about the promises. I know all this stuff. You don't have to tell me. But right now, I just don't care. I've already crossed over. I'm here, and I'm going to be here." The remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. But it wasn't that night in that bar. He knew what was going to happen the next day. I knew what was going to happen the next day. I didn't crawl out from underneath the rock. I had a little walking around sense. Bill Wilson was a brilliant man. He knew what this debacle was going to do. But right then, he just didn't care. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. I hardly dared cross the street, lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck. For it was scarcely daylight. An all-night play supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My withering nerves were still at last. A morning paper told me the market had gone to hell again. Well, so would I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. That was a hard thought.
Oh.
Now, should I kill myself? No, not now. The mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that. So 2 bottles and oblivion.
So 2 handle jugs of gin would knock that little mental fog out.
You know, the mind and body are marvelous mechanisms, for mine endured this agony 2 more years. Sometimes I stole Lois's slender purse in the morning. Terror and madness were on me. Again, I swayed dizzily up before an open window, or the medicine cabinet, where there was poison, cursing myself for being a weakling. There were flights from city to country and back, as Lois and I sought escape.
Lois knew that if she could get Bill back up to the green waters of Vermont, out into the wilderness, they could pitch a tent and camp out under the stars and make love. And this is all recounted in her book, When Love Is Not Enough. That Bill, she could get him away from that insanity of New York. If you've been to New York, you know what I'm talking about. That's a busy place. And she could get him away from there, and he would have moments of dryness. And their life was perfect. But as soon as he got back to New York City, he was off to the races again.
Then came the night when the physical and mental torture was so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window, sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to a lower level, lest I suddenly leap.
And when he drug that mattress, he drug it from, it's easier to fall down the stairs than it is up. So he drug it from up here to down here, and he didn't do that for a night. He stayed in that basement for about a month.
A doctor came with a heavy sedative. Now, the next day, he found me drinking both gin and sedatives.
Now, that's my boy right there, see. He waited 7 pages to tell you that he was doing a little dope, too. But this is Dr. Leonard Strong. This is his brother-in-law.
This combination soon landed me on the rocks. People feared for my sanity, and so did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking, and I was 40 pounds underweight.
Something you might want to write in your margin is that Bill is dying. Bill was a man about 6'4". He had no body fat. And he says, I could eat little or nothing when drinking, which was all the time. And his little thin skeleton was down by 40 pounds. Bill Wilson is dying an alcoholic death at this point.
Now, my brother-in-law, Dr. Strong, is a physician. And through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mentally and physically rehabilitation of alcoholics. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared.
Belladonna is actually a poison. It's derived from the nightshade family, and it's a semi-hallucinogen, but it's designed to keep you from slipping into delirium tremens. And this is the Towns Hospital. It's up on the screen. Is owned by Charles B. Towns. It's an early jitter joint spin drive of sorts.
Yeah, the timeline is September of 1933. Hydrotherapy, mild exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill, bodily and mentally.
There is Dr. Silkworth. Now, you want to highlight that sentence. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though selfish and foolish, remember that's part of our problem, I had been seriously ill, not morally incompetent. Bodily, obsession of the mind, and bodily, allergy of the body, and mentally is the obsession of the mind. There is the disease concept or theory, if you prefer, right there. It's the first time it's mentioned in Bill Wilson's life.
Now, that relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. My incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge.
So here's the third time that he's going to manifest self. It's self-knowledge. I know what's the matter with me now. I'll fix it. I want to read a little deal. Do you guys have these little big book dictionaries out here? Great little tool. I never knew what the goose hung high meant, and it's in here. To have a goose to hang high in preparation for eating during this Depression era was a sign of having good fortune or wealth. Also thought to be from an old myth or superstition that when geese flew low, it meant that evil spirits were present. When the geese flew high, it meant that evil spirits were gone and all was well. In this usage, hung would mean flew. In short, the evil had passed and all was well again. Guys, what do you think we come back at 10 after and pick up in Bill's story? We're at a good breaking point.